Tonight, from Tel Aviv to Tehran, civilians urged to evacuate as Israel and Iran trade missiles for a fourth day. The moment the Iranian state broadcaster came under attack, captured live on air. That's as Israel's president tells me his war cabinet is discussing whether to target Iran's supreme leader.
The supreme leader of Iran has for years called for the annihilation of Israel, has for years called for the annihilation of my nation state.
Here in Israel, a father and a town in mourning after a ballistic missile killed 4 members of one family. In Canada, as G7 leaders meet, another call from Donald Trump for both sides to talk. Even as Tehran strikes again, it started back-channel negotiations for a ceasefire. So who will blink first? That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of The World live from Jerusalem. For the 4th day, missiles have descended from the skies over cities here in Israel and in Iran. These have been the longest and most intense ever attacks between the two sworn enemies, raising fears of a wider war that could draw in the rest of the region, the United States, maybe even Europe. Well, more than 220 people have been killed in Iran since Friday, according to health authorities. Israeli officials say civilians are being targeted. There have been 24 deaths here. Tonight, we'll hear from ordinary people in both countries about what it's like living in constant fear of being bombed. That's as the Israeli president told me his country had no choice but to attack. Isaac Herzog confirmed the war cabinet was discussing the likelihood of targeting Iran's supreme leader. Our conversation coming up in a moment. And as Donald Trump insists both sides need to talk, we'll be live in Alberta in Canada, where the US president is expected to meet Prime Minister Keir Starmer. So a busy programme tonight. Let's get started with our first report from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bonko.
Today, as this Iranian state television presenter was on air, delivering a defiant regime message to Israel, this happened. The roads out of Tehran are gridlocked as thousands are trying to leave the capital to escape intensifying Israeli attacks on the city. Speaking to people inside Iran isn't easy. It is incredibly risky for anyone to say anything against the regime. But Sky News has been in contact with some. We've disguised their voices.
The current situation is a war zone. I personally haven't been out much. The streets are quiet while the motorways are jammed with slow-moving traffic. The roads are extremely busy. Most people are trying to leave the city towards the countryside. The streets and highways are chaos too.
Even though some of the people we spoke to would like to see an end to the Iranian regime, most aren't convinced that this war is the right way to achieve it.
I really don't think that the way for us to reach a better regime and government is through foreign military interference. This is clearly a conflict between two states, and as a result, ordinary people caught in between are being sacrificed.
Israel says that it has now destroyed a third of Iran's ballistic missiles. But barrages are still being fired at Israel every night. And this is what happens when they get through the air defences. 4 people were killed when this apartment block took a direct hit.
And we think actually the ballistic missile hit one of the safe rooms where people were sheltering directly, which is what caused some of the fatalities here. The emergency services have cordoned it all off. They're still working here. We've seen them operating on some of the upper floors, and they are working to make sure that nobody is still trapped inside there.
Michael lives in the next door building. He was sheltering when the missile struck.
We ran away to shelter, and in a few minutes, destruction. Like I can't even explain the situation, the feelings, and that's it.
Frightening.
Yeah.
Despite the ongoing missile attacks and the daily casualties, Israelis we spoke to still support their government's actions.
We need to stop the atomic bombs factory, yes. No one has the right to create this kind of bombs and to aim on us.
For the first time in the war, the IDF has published evacuation warnings for parts of Tehran. It is a demonstration of their confidence to fly over the city now at will. The IDF has said today that they still haven't achieved all of their aims. There is no sense Israel is ready to stop just yet. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Petah Tikva, central Israel.
Well, in the last few minutes, the Reuters news agency has reported that Iranian state TV says that a new wave of Iranian missile attacks on Israel has begun. So that's according to the Iranian state broadcaster reporting that a new wave of Iranian missile attacks on Israel has begun. And usually when that happens, we do start to hear sirens, warnings on our phones, and everybody moves to the bunkers. And occasionally we might see the missiles fly overhead and the interceptors do their job by blowing them out of the sky. So we may or may not see that happening this evening on the program, but we are being told by the Reuters news agency that the Iranian state broadcaster is saying a new wave of Iranian missile attacks on Israel has begun. Now, today, the Israeli military took the unprecedented step of urging residents in parts of Tehran to evacuate. Israel's President Isaac Herzog told me his country had no choice but to attack and to keep on attacking. He pointed to intelligence suggesting Iran was moving dramatically towards a nuclear bomb. And crucially, he did not rule out targeting Iran's political leadership, including the supreme leader. I asked him whether Israel got its timing right in starting another war. Just have a listen to my conversation with the president.
When you take such decisions of historic magnitude and proportions, you have to analyze all facets and all facts. The truth of the matter is there was no other choice. It was just, as we say in football, the 90th minute, because the Iranian nuclear program was rushing underneath, by the way, under disguise, was rushing to the bomb, meaning the bomb is created of two things, enriched uranium and the armament part of it, which makes the bomb. They were proceeding dramatically on both venues. And the armament part was done clandestinely, totally clandestinely. The enrichment part was known and was criticized heavily by the report of the Secretary General of the International Atomic Agency in Vienna a few weeks ago, and in the vote of the Board of Governors of the IAEA in Vienna on Thursday.
And I want to quote what they said in a moment, but your intelligence says that Iran was rushing to a bomb. The Directorate of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, speaking just a few months ago, 2 months ago, before the Senate Intelligence Committee, said that the US intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. Why is your intelligence different to that of the United States?
That was 2 months ago. Following that, a delegation of the very high officials from Israel, who are the closest to the prime ministers, came to the White House and presented all the data to the president's team, the national security team of the President of the United States of America, and I think from then on, it's different.
So the United States, though, is calling for restraint. I mean, when you listen to President Trump, he's not saying go in, bomb Iran. When you have presented them with this information, why are they erring on the side of caution?
I was not part of the discussions in the room. I'm a head of state. I'm not the head of the executive branch, the prime minister and the cabinet. But I'm exposed to the information, the intelligence, and I must say it's unanimous in Israel by all experts concerned. And moreover, we don't argue with the United States of America. It's our closest ally, and we're utterly grateful and respectful of the President of the United States as in esteem. But they have their decision-making process and their considerations, and we have ours. Israeli government throughout the history of the State of Israel have always been very crystal clear. with regards to a nuclear capability of our enemies. It has to be removed at once. We've attacked in Iraq in 1981, we've attacked in Syria in 2007, and now it happened that we had to attack in Iran before it's too late.
At what risk, though? Because US President Donald Trump's special Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, has told Senate Republicans that if Israel attacks Iran's nuclear facilities, and this was just days before this war began, the Iranian Republic's response could lead to a mass casualty event. Are you willing to accept that there will be a mass casualty event?
We are very much aware of the risks of this war, and we want to make clear. We saw it. You're here. Every few hours or every night there are missile attacks, heavy missile attacks on Israel. We have our air defense systems, which are excellent. Unfortunately, we have casualties, brothers and sisters of ours, from toddlers all the way up to the age of 94.
And that you're willing to
Holocaust
accept
survivors, people of all facets, veteran Israelis and new immigrants, Muslims and Jews. No, we don't accept it at all. We're absolutely and adamantly, we don't accept it at all. That's why we're fighting also to eliminate their capability of firing at us, and that is what we are trying to do.
But
parallel to the fact that we have to remove the Iranian nuclear program because we see the negotiating process as being futile because they're lying whilst talking to us, talking to the United States, let's say. They're lying whilst talking to the United States and other allies.
I just want to ask you about some news that's come out in the last 24 hours. President Trump has said that, or reports have come out, that President Trump told Israel not to kill Iran's supreme leader. Is Iran's supreme leader fair game?
So first, I would say that I do not want to comment about Iran's supreme leader. That is being discussed in the closed rooms of the War Cabinet and, of course, in dialogue with the United States of America. Let's just remember that the supreme leader of Iran has for years called for the annihilation of Israel, has for years called for the annihilation of my nation state, of the Jewish people, of the Israelis. He's been calling and instructing to move forward with that all the time. They spread havoc and terror all over the world. You ask yourself, why do the Iranians have terror cells all over the world? Why did they carry out so many atrocities in the last decades? And why have they launched again and again wars through their proxies? After all, October 7th is a decision of their proxy Hamas, Hezbollah attacking us from the north and the Houthis from Yemen. And that's about time that the world understand it. We are fighting here for the entire free world. We are defending Europe. We are defending Europe because the last thing Europe wants is an evil empire of evil with a jihadist ideology holding nuclear weapons.
But they don't want to see another conflict embroiled here in the Middle East.
We agree, but let's talk about de-escalation. You want to de-escalate? I tell all the leaders of the G7 now, who are convening in Canada, you want to de-escalate like we want to de-escalate? You want to de-escalate? Get the nukes out of Iran's hand. That's all there is to it. It's all very simple. Escalation means rushing to the bomb. Escalation means attacking us with missiles from all over. That's escalation. The cost of living of every family in the world has gone up because a tribe of Houthis in Yemen of 50,000 people are holding cruise missiles and ballistic missiles given to them by Iran. Well, this cannot go on anymore.
I'm just going to quote you the International Atomic Energy Agency. They said that inspectors in Iran who frequently visited the Republic's two main enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordow, they said that they found no evidence to suggest the Islamic regime is developing a weapons program.
But you know what?
Again, that's
it's
the IAEA.
It's unbelievable because the IAEA himself has complained and made clear that its inspectors were blocked and removed, that many sites could not be seen.
After this conflict began?
Yes, there are, no, I mean, not after this war started. In the last few years and in the last few months, we know it. There are other hidden sites that everybody knows they're holding their enrichment quantities out there. Let's not hide anywhere. Everything is clear. The IAEA took a very strong position in its vote over the weekend because it is clear to everybody that Iran is lying and hiding and not cooperating according to its obligations.
Mr. President, I just want to ask you about the death toll. We've seen over a dozen people here in Israel killed, and we've talked about it's tragic.
Very tragic and very painful.
And we've seen several hundred people killed in Iran. If Israel is, and as the Prime Minister has called for regime change in Iran, we're seeing some of the people who, the names of the people in Iran who have been killed, activists, artists, Pilates teachers. Is this the message that Israel wants to send to the Iranian people?
Or I know only about the leadership of the National Revolutionary Guards, their intelligence and their Air Force, and all those who instigate terror. God forbid, we are adamantly not aiming at civilians, as opposed to the Iranians who are aiming at civilians all the time. And again, I want to make it clear, we did not seek this war. We did not want this war. This war was imposed on us from October 7th until now. Let's not be mistaken. And I want to tell all our viewers, if you want to change the reality in the Middle East, with Israel and many, many Arab nations moving forward to rapprochement, including with the Palestinians, the only way is to block the Iranian influence, because the Iranian influence has worked relentlessly to undermine any peace process, relentlessly to undermine any rapprochement between Israel and the Arab world, relentlessly, and they threaten leaders, and they radicalize, and they go to revolutions, and they use other proxies as their basis against Israel and against the United States and Western forces, because they want to seek dominance in the Middle East.
Mr. President, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That was Israel's President Isaac Herzog speaking to me a little earlier. I just want to focus now on the military strategy being used by Iran and Israel as missile strikes continue for a fourth day. Israel is aiming to limit Iran's capacity to send ballistic missiles towards its cities. And you heard the Israeli president there talking about fears about a nuclear bomb. Tehran is attacking Israel's ports and oil refineries, likely in a bid to cause maximum disruption. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been plotting the targets for both sides. Have a look.
In 4 days of strikes, Israel has hit targets across the breadth of Iran. Two of the major military priorities for Israel: air supremacy, destroying weapon systems that could shoot down their planes, and also degrading Iran's ability to fire missiles back at Israel. Some of the latest satellite images we've got show how Israel has been attacking missile sites. In the western city of Kermanshah, damage can be seen to a known missile base, with storage buildings and tunnels clearly struck and destroyed. Israel's military claims it's destroyed a third of Iran's surface-to-surface missile launches now. Near Shiraz, huge amounts of smoke and fires can be seen on the satellite images at an important missile site and an electronics production facility, thought to have been involved in developing radar systems and missile parts. The two most important sites for Iran's nuclear programme, ultimately what this is all about, are at Natanz and Fordo. Iran has threatened to leave the nuclear non-proliferation treaty if the Israeli attacks continue. Let's take a closer look firstly at Natanz. This is a big site and thought to be the main centre for enriching uranium. There are signs of damage to several buildings, including electrical substations and a fuel enrichment building. But Fordo may be the key and the toughest nut to crack. Its uranium enrichment halls are dug deep underground inside a mountain. Attacks and damage at the site appear limited so far. Military experts say Israel would need US bunker-busting bombs weighing several tons to breach the site. But is President Trump willing to use them to finish off Iran's nuclear programme if that's what's required? Israel also clearly has extraordinary intelligence, pinpointing the location of key members of Iran's regime. After eliminating 20 top figures on the first night of strikes, they've continued to pick off targets, most recently Intelligence Chief Mohammad Kazemi and his deputy, and others on Sunday. State media says more than 200 civilians have also been killed in attacks. Let's look now at what Iran's missiles and drones have hit in Israel. Their ballistic missile barrages have mostly focused on areas around the major cities of Tel Aviv and Haifa. They are densely populated areas, but with lots of nearby military targets too. At least one missile came close to hitting the Kiryat, that's Israel's defence headquarters in the centre of Tel Aviv, on Friday. Civilian buildings have been hit across Tel Aviv's urban sprawl, including Petah Tikva and Bnei Brak on Sunday night. More than 20 civilians have been killed in Israel. In Haifa, Iranians have focused attacks at the area around the port close to a power plant and Israel's largest oil refinery. A strike on those targets would do considerable damage to Israel's energy infrastructure. One key question: how much have Iranians depleted their stocks of drones and missiles? And can they now do anything to Israel, whose warplanes are now prowling their skies at will, working through a long list of targets? Diplomatic efforts are underway to end this soon, but Israel currently shows little sign of stopping.
That was our International Affairs Editor Dominic Waghorn there. Well, Iran announced today that its parliament is preparing a bill to leave the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Last week, the UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, declared that Iran was in violations of its treaty obligations. But Iran's ambassador to the UK, Saeed Ali Mousavi, has insisted his country has always followed the rules in developing a peaceful nuclear program. I spoke to him yesterday. Just have a listen to part of our conversation.
Every nuclear activities of Iran is under the monitoring and, on the auspices of monitoring of the IAEA. There is no any ambiguity for this matter. And I do believe that the recent resolution by the Board of Governors of IAEA is a politically motivated action. This is the one aspects of, unfortunately, European countries make another mistake regarding for the Iranian nuclear activities. And it's very important that during the implementation of JCPOA, we prove our genuine intention to regard and implementation all of the matters related to the Iranian peaceful nuclear activities. IAEA reported 15 times that there is no any deviation, there is no any breaches from Iranian side regarding for the nuclear activities, nuclear peaceful activities.
The Iranian ambassador to the UK. Well, let's speak now to Laura Holgate. She's a former US ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us here on the programme. You're just listening there to the Iranian ambassador to the UK saying that the actions of the IAEA, the quarterly report that they put out, was politically motivated when they said that Iran wasn't meeting its obligations. I know you're not in your role now, but just could you respond and react to, this idea from the Iranians that what the IAEA has done was politically motivated?
Well, the IAEA has been consistent for the last 5 years in pointing out problems and incompletenesses in the Iranian declarations and in their ability to adequately have visibility on certain facilities on the ground. And so what was delivered to the Board of Governors last month was a comprehensive report that puts all of these pieces together, that explains the story and why these gaps in knowledge matter. And it's a purely fact-based report. It was requested by a resolution that was passed by the Board of Governors last year, requested of the Director General Grossi to present this report. And the report was clear. Iran is not fully cooperating. They're not fully answering the questions, and the IAEA can no longer confirm that all material has been accounted for or that all activities in Iran are in fact peaceful. That's a fact, and that's what the Board of Governors reacted to with their resolution.
So in your view, though, one of the things that I saw in that report, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the IAEA also said that from their assessment, they didn't believe that at this point in time, Iran was trying to weaponize its program, which is, from my understanding, in line with what Tulsi Gabbard, the intelligence chief of the Directorate of the United States, also said a couple of months ago, that the US intelligence pointed to the fact that they didn't believe that Iran was trying to weaponize it at this stage. From your work and your time within the IAEA, did you get a sense that that was actually the case, that they were trying to move quickly towards a bomb?
No, it's been the consistent report of the U.S. intelligence community that Iran is not pursuing a weapons program. What they are pursuing is a program of ambiguity, and where they go right up to the edge of being very close to having enough material that could make a weapon very quickly, where they've been incomplete in their reporting on past activities when they did have a weapons program. And so, no, that judgment remains the case, and I have no indications that Iran has made a choice to go towards a weapon. The question is whether the recent events will cause them to change that posture, to move away from that posture of ambiguity, and actually, as was previously mentioned, withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, kick out the IAEA inspectors, and have their entire program go dark without any ability to understand what's happening inside.
So, Laura, the president of Israel spoke to me today, and we played that interview just a few minutes ago, and he said their intelligence is saying, which clearly is then, in contradicts or in contrast to what the US is saying, that Iran was quickly moving towards a bomb, that, they were in the 11th hour, they had to do something, they had no choice. Do you buy that then?
Well, that's clearly a different judgment than what's been made over the years by U.S. intelligence communities, and I see no reason that it would have changed. The question is whether the Israelis' actions themselves will cause that judgment to change, whether that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Or whether it actually does the opposite, and then they rush to get the bomb following these events.
That's exactly what I mean, yes.
So what you're saying is actually, the Israeli attack on Iran could have detrimental effects on the whole nature of the way that the Iranians were proceeding as far as their nuclear program it was concerned.
It could well do that, and that's been why the U.S. has consistently, over multiple administrations, favored a diplomatic solution, because the ability to militarily significantly set back the program is very minimal, and the effort to the attack to try to eliminate that program only sharpens the voices of those in the Iranian regime who may say, okay, see, we need an actual weapons program in order to deter our enemies in the region.
And just very briefly, Laura, what do you believe the US should do now?
Well, the U.S. remained open to continuing the diplomatic conversations that they were having in Oman through the Omani government, indirectly with Iran. The Iranians chose, I think, for very clear, obvious reasons, not to continue with that. I hope that the U.S. continues to be open to that and makes that offer again once the strikes calm down or the military action calms down. But I think at the moment, it's very difficult to imagine that U.S. and Iran, even with these indirect talks, that could continue while the strikes are going on.
Laura Holgate, a former U.S. ambassador to the IAEA, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, in the past few minutes, Iran's representative at the UN has been speaking to reporters and accused Israel of war crimes. Just have a listen.
So far, 1,480 people have been killed or injured. At least 224 civilians, including women and children, have been killed. Many of the victims are children. In one brutal attack on a residential building in Tehran, around 20 children were martyred. Due to the severity of the injuries, this number may rise. Israel also targeted vital civilians and economic infrastructure, water storage, fuel depots, the petrochemical facilities, including the Escalation refinery in Bushehr, were hit. Hospitals were also struck. There are not accidents, they are war crimes. Just hours ago, Israeli regime deliberately targeted the office of Iran's news agency during a live broadcast. This appalling attack constitutes a blatant war crime and a direct assault on press freedom. The Israeli regime has once again demonstrated that it is the foremost enemy of truth. It holds the disgraceful record of being the world's leading perpetrator of violence against journalists and media professionals. In response to this barbaric attack and aggression, Iran exercised its inherent right to self-defense in line with Article 51 of Charter.
That was Iran's permanent representative to the UN, Saeed Iravani. Well, you're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim, in Jerusalem. Still to come on the programme. G7 leaders want to contain the Israel-Iran conflict, but can they agree on the best way to do it? We're live to the summit next.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robin, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back to Jerusalem. Let's focus some more now on diplomacy. And Donald Trump reportedly vetoed a plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader this week. And earlier in the day, at a meeting of world leaders in Canada, he reiterated his call for both countries to start negotiating. Our US correspondent James Matthews is at the G7 summit and sent us this report.
President of the United States of America
They're not calling this a crisis meeting, but it is a meeting amidst crisis. The smiles hid a troubled agenda. It had conflict between Israel and Iran at its centre. As they posed for the official photos, the picture was changing. Iran wants to talk about de-escalation. It was confirmed by the president, pivotal in what happens next.
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
In the shadow of Canada's Rocky Mountains, military conflict isn't alone in darkening the mood. There are the politics too. The Canadian Prime Minister is hosting a meeting most awkward. Donald Trump looked every inch the reluctant guest. He has roiled the rest on trade, tariffs, Ukraine, and an America First policy that doesn't sit comfortably at this table. It will be the stuff of terse discussion here, but hostility in the Middle East is the headline.
There's shared concern about the risk of escalation, obviously, shared concern about the nuclear program of Iran, but absolutely a focus on how we de-escalate this, and that'll be a central focus as we go into the talks today, get that de-escalation.
This was the picture of Donald Trump at the G7 in Canada 7 years ago, an image to define him as a president disengaged. Then Donald Trump ripped up the joint communique upon his departure from the Canadian gathering. Accordingly, there will be no signed agreement this time. Trump has changed the G7 right down to the admin. The UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is talking trade with Donald Trump here, saying the country is in the final stages of implementing a deal with the United States, and that he expects a deal to be completed, in his words, very soon. At this G7, it is a mountain to climb, and it's not the only one.
And as James mentioned there, we are expecting the Prime Minister Keir Starmer to be meeting with Donald Trump this evening. As soon as it happens, we will be bringing that to you live here on the programme and bringing some analysis around that. Now, Iran's health ministry says at least 224 people have been killed by Israeli strikes over the last 4 days. Top regime and military figures are Israel's targets, but many others who never asked for conflict are losing their lives in the violence too. We just wanted to bring you some of their stories via local reports and social media. Let's have a look. Parsa Mansour was a popular competitor in Iran's growing sport of paddle tennis, a form of the game played on smaller courts. He was said to be on his way home from training when he was killed during the first night of airstrikes in Tehran. Parnia Abbasi was a poet and English teacher. Reports in Iran say she, her parents and younger brother were killed by a missile that struck their apartment building. In a tragically final poem she scribbled in a notebook, she wrote, "I burn, I fade, I become a silent star." And Nilufar Kalevand, a Pilates instructor in Tehran, she and her parents were killed by an Israeli strike that hit their home. 3 of more than 220 people reportedly killed over the last 4 days. Well, let's bring in Dr. Siavash Ranjbar Daimi, a senior lecturer in modern Middle Eastern history at the University of St Andrews. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us here on the programme. We just went through just a few of the names of the 220 people who were killed in Iran, and just in terms of the way that they were killed, the fact that they were walking home, some of these people, or sleeping in their apartment blocks, it just makes you realise how much Iran was taken by surprise by this attack.
Yes, of course, it was taken by surprise, but let's not forget that the Israeli tactics are starting to resemble a whole lot like Gaza and Beirut, really. We've moved from hitting nuclear installations and military installations, which are maybe in less densely inhabited areas, to targets in the middle of residential areas, including the radio television complex today. Remember that around 300,000 people were asked to evacuate in an unspecified amount of time. And I had to actually help a relative do this because that relative happened to be in the red area drawn up by the IDF this afternoon in central Tehran. So clearly, as targets next to residential areas in broad daylight and during business hours are being struck, there's going to be victims. Let's also not forget that Tehran doesn't have air shelters. Iran has not been in a conventional conflict with another country since the 80s, the Iran-Iraq War. That sort of experience has gone. The city has developed considerably since then. It doesn't have air raid shelters. There's a whole debate in Iran now as to whether metro stations in Tehran and mosques and schools should be turned into air raid shelters. But none of these are really suitable for the task. So the problem remains that the Israeli methods, which, as I said, are starting to look really like Gaza and Beirut, will continue to produce civilian casualties moving forward.
And Dr. Siavash, I just wonder, how are the Iranian people reacting and what are they saying on the ground? Because we know that the regime is deeply unpopular, but the Iranian people are no doubt also questioning Israel's tactics right now.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is starting to look like a major endeavor and it's causing a major toll in human life. People evacuating in this way, people in a panic leaving the capital Tehran in rows. We've seen footage of very large traffic jams and queues at petrol stations, scenes that Iran hadn't seen, again, for many decades. Obviously, the Islamic Republic was very unpopular. It was unpopular during last year's presidential elections when it barely scraped a 50% attendance, even less than that in the second round, 40% in the first round. And clearly, there are still a lot of grievances towards the way the economy is conducted, towards even the way the nuclear program is conducted. There hasn't been any proper poll on whether Iranians want uranium enrichment to carry on at such levels, even at 60%. However, all this does not translate into support for what Israel is doing. And I think many people are realizing that this is certainly not the way to bring about political change in Iran. And any change in regime on the cusp of an Israeli offensive, I don't think is doomed to be successful and will certainly be unpopular.
Dr. Siavash, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, more stories of those caught in the crossfire on the other side of the conflict here in Israel.
So direct hit on the hospital. Absolute mayhem.
All the bays are full and they're all gunshot wounds. Absolute carnage here.
We hear a lot about the dead in this conflict, but there are going to be so many disabled people.
We could make a difference here and stop the war, and if we don't, I don't think there will be anything to come back to.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
They are pushing forward, trying to get people to disperse.
What Prince Harry wanted to do was to eject me.
Is that your opinion?
It is. It is.
They were serious, coordinated attacks.
It's an entire generation that will have to contend with the horrifying impacts of this conflict.
The number of patients is increasing.
It's been quite some day.
Wait, what country are you
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
You've gone viral.
I've ever had such a reaction.
It's just incredible.
Since the Oval Office meeting, have they reached out to you?
If Ukraine asks for help and its allies decide to help, then that's the end of it.
Criticism of you, the president, is banned. How is this a fair election?
Historic day here today.
Beth Rigby from Sky.
You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
There could be some more painful decisions to come.
Thank you. Thank you.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back to the programme. We've been reporting on the Israel-Iran conflict and the wider implications. Well, you're looking at the moment at live pictures of Alberta in Canada, where G7 leaders are currently meeting, and we know that this issue, escalating conflict is top of the agenda for world leaders who have gathered there. President Donald Trump says that he does not intend to sign a joint statement calling for de-escalation between Israel and Iran, which has been drafted by the G7 leaders, and that's according to a person familiar with the matter. It was discussed earlier today. It was drafted by leaders at the G7 summit, but President Donald Trump says that he will not be signing that joint statement calling for de-escalation of the conflict between the two. Now, we are expecting the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Donald Trump to meet in the next minute or so, so we will be bringing that to you shortly. And while they will be discussing trade and trying to get certain trade deals over the line, and that will be the focus of their conversation, no doubt, just as they've been doing throughout the day, discussing the issue around Iran and Israel and how to best de-escalate this situation. Already, we've seen calls from the French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor, as well as Keir Starmer, hoping to build some kind of consensus among the leaders about the Middle East situation, alongside the summit's host, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. All are asking for de-escalation and for an end to the hostilities. We have entered the fourth day of conflict between the two. Now, we'll be bringing that to you as soon as it happens. Here in Israel, as in Iran, tragic stories are emerging of families with no role in this conflict being caught up and killed in it. They include Palestinian citizens of Israel. Sky correspondent Cordelia Lynch spoke to one man who's been left to bury his wife and two daughters. Have a listen.
Tamra, a town in despair, grieving 4 members of the same family, where they mourn huddled together. A place to find solace where there are no answers.
Leanne, how deep is this loss for you?
It's very deep. It hurts my soul. This community lost them. Manar al-Asim, she's a teacher. Shada is a 20-year-old. She wanted to become a judge. She wanted to be someone. And Hala is only 13 years old. No one is protected. That's the thing. No one is protected. Not Arabs, not Jews, not Palestinians, not Israelis. No one is protected.
The Khatib family home was eviscerated by an Iranian missile bound for Haifa in Israel, more than an hour away. This is a tight-knit town. Most living here are Palestinian citizens of Israel.
We found body here, the woman, and blood at the wall, and some pieces there at the garden and the neighbors everywhere.
Ahmad was horrified to see parts of his neighbours' bodies thrown across the road.
After 2 days, 3 days, you're still scared.
There were safe rooms here, but they weren't enough to protect those inside from the force of a ballistic missile. Floors collapsed and a family was torn apart in an instant. This is a residential neighbourhood. The victims were civilians, and it is their neighbours and their friends that are clearing up the rubble and ruins of lives lost.
Here you see the skies lit up and then the devastating strike. But this video is just as stunning. The sound of Jewish Israelis from a nearby town rejoicing. May your village burn, they sing. No one will find that harder to hear than Raja, who lost his wife and 2 daughters.
I feel terrible. I feel fire in my body. I lose my family. For what? For what? For a missile to become the Iran.
This conflict with Iran, can you see an end to it?
Conflict with Iran, conflict with Gaza, conflict with Lebanon, conflict with Syria. We have a government, we have people that they want the war. They want the war. We want peace, we want to live.
This is a place caught in the crosshairs of a conflict they have no say in, and very little shelter.
And we'll be speaking to Cordelia in a moment, but I just want to take you back to Canada and to the G7 meeting where Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer have been meeting tonight. They're going to be speaking shortly, and as soon as they come up, we will be bringing that statement and that press conference to you live. But let's bring Cordelia back in. And Cordy, we're just looking at these live shots of what it looks like a door where Donald Trump and Keir Starmer will emerge from in Alberta. And of course, they're meeting on that luxury mountain lodge to discuss some of the most pressing issues of our time. And no doubt, this issue was probably not on the agenda a week ago, but it is now front and center, the escalating situation between Iran and Israel.
Absolutely. And Donald Trump sees this as an opportunity to carve out a place for himself in geopolitical history, to reshape, in effect, the dynamics here in the Middle East. He remains optimistic, confident even, that he can bring Iran to the table to try and secure some kind of deal. You must remember, of course, that it was Donald Trump that withdrew from that nuclear non-proliferation treaty in the first place. But he is hoping that this pressure on Iran that we've seen play out amidst this conflict will somehow help him broker a deal. I think certainly Iran and Iranian leadership will see this as very problematic when they are under attack effectively. Domestically here in Israel, people are coalescing around the flag. There's been a lot of rallying for a leader in Benjamin Netanyahu who's proved very unpopular. His leadership has at times been faltering, and he's been met with open protests about the war that he has waged in Gaza. I think what is different here and this time is that the polls here in Israel suggest that a lot of people support bringing Iran under control. They fear the development of a nuclear bomb. Many of Netanyahu's critics have, for a great deal of time now, been pressing him
to take action, particularly when Iran's proxies in the shape of Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis are looking weakened. They think that this was good timing for the Israeli leadership. But there is jeopardy in all of this. What does success exactly look like, Yalda? It is not enough to try and curtail the nuclear ambitions, the development of a bomb, but they also need to crush the political will to try and develop that further, to ensure that they won't just return in a few months and redevelop those nuclear facilities. And I think all of that is very much up in the air. And I think in terms of Israeli patience here, if we see a spike in the civilian death toll, if people spend weeks, months more possibly in shelters, I think patience could run out. But I think what is striking really is Netanyahu, who has struggled a lot with his popularity. In the last few days, many people, even some of his fiercest critics, showing support for him and his more strident moves on Iran, more strident than they have been, of course, for Israel in decades.
Yeah, absolutely, Cordy. As you say, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted to launch an attack like this on Iran for decades. He's talked about it. I mean, even in the information that came out in the hours and days after this brazen attack on Iran, we knew that for at least 2 decades, Mossad had developed agents on the ground working and gathering information, that they had developed drone bases there so that they could launch this type of attack. So there has been a lot of planning that has gone into this kind of attack. And as you say, for Benjamin Netanyahu, who has struggled politically, it is about political survival at this point. And he has struggled with the war in Gaza. He has almost turned Israel into a pariah state, and Western allies have been incredibly critical of how he has prosecuted this war. And suddenly we're seeing the nation standing behind him. He's often known as Mr. Security, and for decades he was known as being risk-averse. But now he's taking these sorts of risks. We saw he took this kind of risk in Lebanon when he tried to decapitate, and he successfully decapitated Hezbollah. And then, of course, this now. But as you say, the question is, and what remains up in the air, how does this end?
Absolutely, Yalda, and I think there is no guarantee and there is no roadmap yet about exactly what the next steps might be. And we recall with Gaza criticisms in the early days after October the 7th, people saying, what now? What comes next? What exactly are you looking to achieve? And the question on everyone's lips here is whether it is regime change that they want or not, and how are they going to secure that. I think what's been exposing of Mossad's years of development, what they were able to prosecute in this wave of attacks, is just the level of intelligence that they seem to have around the top brass. Many people I've been speaking to today are speculating they do believe that they may well decide to try and kill the supreme leader.
I'm just going to interrupt you, Cordy, for a second, because we are now seeing President Trump and Sir Keir Starmer emerging from behind those doors to begin making their statements after meeting. Let's just have a little listen in.
Thank you very much. We all know the great Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is, sorry about that.
Very important document.
A little windy out here. We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union, and it's a fair deal for both. Going to produce a lot of jobs, a lot of income, and we have many. I want to congratulate you.
But Donald, thank you very much. This now implements on car tariffs and aerospace our really important agreement. And so this is a very good day for both of our countries, a real sign of strength. So thank you again, Donald. A really important day for both of us.
Great people, great people.
Has anything changed in the agreement since you spoke on the phone from the Oval Office?
Not much.
Nope.
Not much.
This is implemented.
What is the President? May I ask you a question, please? G7 leaders are calling for de-escalation in Israel and Iran, but you are the key to unlocking that.
That's right. And here I am.
And here you are.
Yeah.
So can I ask you, sir, have you spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu? When might you speak to him?
I've spoken to everybody.
What will you say?
Israel is doing very well, as you probably noticed, and I gave Iran 60 days, and they said no, and the 61st you saw what happened. Day 61, so I'm in constant touch, and as I've been saying, I think a deal will be signed, or something will happen, but a deal will be signed. And I think Iran is foolish not to sign one.
Mr. President, Iran is accusing Netanyahu of attacking them to deliberately derail your nuclear plan. What do you say to that? Do you think that's
No.
And
Look, Iran should have signed the deal.
if it would help bring Iran to the negotiating table, would you guarantee that the U.S. would not get involved militarily?
Well, I think Iran basically is at the negotiating table. They want to make a deal. And as soon as I leave here, we're going to be doing something. But I have to leave here. I have, this commitment. I have a lot of commitments. I have a commitment to a lot of countries, including the UK, where we just signed our deal.
Mr. President, where are you settling on steel tariffs with respect to the UK? Are those going to zero, or are they staying at
We're gonna let you have that information in a little while.
Russia-Ukraine talks, sir, on U.S.-Russia talks, when will they restart?
They're starting already.
Mr. President, do you agree to the European push to apply more sanctions on Russia? Does the US support that?
Well, Europe is saying that, but they haven't done it yet. Let's see them do it first.
You told me earlier that you could sanction Russia. Why wait? Why wait to sanction them?
Because I'm waiting to see whether or not a deal is signed.
Can you guarantee the UK won't be subject?
And don't forget, sanctions cost us a lot of money. When I sanction a country, that costs the U.S. a lot of money, a tremendous amount of money. It's not just let's sign a document. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Sanctions are not that easy. It's not just a one-way street.
Mr. President, on AUKUS, the submarine agreement, is that still proceeding? You've initiated a sort of review of that.
Yep, we're proceeding with that. It's a really important deal to both of us. I think the President is doing a review. We did a review when we came into government, so that makes good sense to me. But It's a really important...
We're very long-time partners and allies and friends, and we've become friends in a short period of time. He's slightly more liberal than I am, to put it mildly.
Well, we stand slightly on the left.
But for some reason we get along.
We make it work.
Mr. President,
one thing
on Russia. The way of arming Israel.
There are quite a few British voters who worry we side more with the Russians over the Ukraine war. Can you reassure British
No,
people
no. I just, you know what I side on? Saving lives. I only care about saving lives. We have nothing to do with it except that Biden stupidly let us get into that mess and gave him $350 billion. $350 billion. And yet, despite that, you saw how we did in the Middle East. We took in $5.1 trillion. We have $15 trillion almost, looking around that number, going to be invested in the U.S. So the money is not the thing in this case. It's 5,000 young people are being killed every week in Russia, Ukraine. And if I can stop that, I'll be very happy. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian. So you could say, what am I doing? But I'd like to see if I could stop it.
Would you consider going
that Israel can fully eliminate the threat that Iran poses, this nuclear threat that they pose, without the United States military?
Who said that?
No, I'm asking if you believe they can.
Well, it doesn't. It's irrelevant. Something's going to happen.
Mr. President, would you consider traveling to the Mideast as part of any talks if it would help broker a deal?
Yeah, but I think we're doing pretty well. We're talking. We have a thing called a telephone, so we're talking. But it's always better to talk in person.
Mr. President, do you want to see regime change in Iran?
I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran, and we're well on our way to making sure that happens.
And we've had a discussion about that this morning. There's in the G7 absolute clarity in relation to the nuclear program. We do not want to see it.
Mr. President,
do you have a response?
About any future tariffs?
What?
Can you guarantee the UK will be protected from any future tariffs?
The UK is very well protected. You know why? Because I like them. That's why. That's their ultimate protection. Thank you very much. The Prime Minister's done a great job. I want to just tell that to the people of the United Kingdom. He's done a very, very good job. He's done what other people, they've been talking about this deal for 6 years, right?
6 years.
And he's done what they haven't been able to do. So he's done really a very good job.
How did you respond to Tucker Carlson criticizing you, saying that you were complicit in the war?
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen.
And quickly,
Thank you.
have you spoken to Zelensky before your bilat?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Japan?
A lot of them. Could happen.
How to go with the Japanese, sir?
Well.
You were listening there to President Donald Trump with Sir Keir Starmer, and they just announced that they'd finalised the UK-US trade deal. Donald Trump described Keir Starmer as a friend. He said, "We've become friends in a short space of time, and I just want to tell the people of the United Kingdom that he's done a terrific deal here." And he confirmed that the two sides had finalised the US-UK trade deal. He was also asked a number of questions about the escalating situation between Iran and Israel. He said that Israel has been doing very well, that he's in constant touch with the Israelis. He said that Iran is foolish to have not signed a deal and that Iran should have signed a deal. He said, "As soon as I leave here, I will be doing something," and he said that Iran wants to make a deal. So just summing up those two things, that the UK and the US have finalised their trade deal. He also spoke about the escalating situation between Israel and Iran. Let's bring in our James Matthews, who joins me live from the G7 summit. James, we're going to speak with Cordelia in a moment about those talking points that he made about Israel and Iran, but I just want to ask you about this finalising of this trade deal between the UK and the US.
Yeah, hi, Yalda. A momentous occasion, I suppose. Certainly one that was trailed by Sir Keir Starmer when he came here to the G7 this morning, was talking about how this deal would be implemented very soon. It has been stalled, of course. I was there in the Oval Office when it was announced in the company of the British Ambassador, Peter Mandelson. And, you know, the deal in terms of the figures, not ideal, and something that Britain, the United Kingdom, will have been largely underwhelmed by, but it was pretty much the best that they could reach for in the circumstances. Still that baseline 10% tariff, which was an increase on what had existed previously. So not perhaps ideal. What was even less ideal was the delay that we have seen since that day in the Oval Office and this day at the G7 summit. But as you saw there, that is the deal finally signed. I mean, Donald Trump fluffed his lines rather when, well, first of all, he dropped the paper of the agreement and also described it as a deal signed with the European Union. Clearly, he got the script wrong. It is a US-UK deal. He said the details of it would be revealed and announced and poured over in due course. So we wait to pick over the bones of the figures, the detail, the value to the United Kingdom of that tense, long-running negotiation, of course. But a result for Sir Keir Starmer coming here to Canada. Quite how big and good a result will depend, frankly, on what's in that agreement. So we wait to see. But that's the big news. That was the headline from that Q&A. The other one, of course, and you're going to speak to Cordy shortly about it, is the business of Israel and Iran. And as you pointed out, Beth Rigby, our own Beth Rigby, was asking the questions there. The first one to Donald Trump, essentially, where does it go from here? And he said Iran would be foolish not to sign a deal. He said Iran effectively is still at the negotiating table as he would have it, and he expects a deal to be signed by Iran.